we are, of course, speaking to the ANC's Head of Elections, Mdumiseni Ntuli. Quite a lot to talk about. I mean, even earlier on in the show, we brought you an interview with former President Thabo Mbeki, who was speaking once again about the state of the ANC in conversation with our international news editor, Sophie Mokoena. And he talks about some of the issues that he says the ANC is quite awake to, especially the challenges of South Africans and how the party should be responding to this. And all of this is happening in the context of the party's list process. There's been quite a lot of talk about the lists that were leaked and the names that were subsequently then seen on the list, and the party's Secretary General saying that there was a strict criteria that was in fact applied here, and there is quite, of course, a lot of focus on this particular list, and even with the IEC having now fired that employee who was said to be responsible for this particular list. So let's welcome the ANC's Head of Elections, Mdumiseni Ntuli. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Ntuli.
Thank you very much, and good evening to you and the viewers at home, and thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. So let's just start with former President Thabo Mbeki, in conversation with my colleague Sophie Mokoena, says that the ANC is quite aware of some of the issues that the electorate is unhappy with, and as they go to their door-to-door campaigns, the party needs to focus on some of these issues and deal and tell the public as to how they're going to be dealing with some of these issues. And then it begs the question, what posture is the ANC taking, particularly when it comes to how it's going to be responding to some of the challenges that have been raised by some of the people? I'm sure you're well aware of them.
Well, of course, President Mbeki is quite correct. And our own approach and posture is rooted on the fact that we have been very privileged to lead South Africa right from the beginning in 1994 up to today. So as a consequence of that, we've gained a lot of experience and knowledge about governance. And of course, along this journey, we have had to contend with some of the difficulties, which many of them are because of external factors that are impacting negatively on the pace of change in our country, but also some of which may have been as a result of how the movement and the democratic state may have taken certain detours which have undermined the pace of transformation in our country. So what President Mbeki is saying is that if you look at our manifesto, we have articulated 6 priorities which are talking precisely to what the population of South Africa is concerned about. And in each of those priorities, we've outlined what we're going to do and how we're going to go about in ensuring that we respond to the aspirations of our people, which is what the ANC has always been known for.
It's one thing to have a manifesto that you say speaks to some of these issues, but it's another thing for you to tell us what posture you're taking. When you knock on somebody's door, are you apologizing to them for some of what you've put South Africans through, or are you, as a party, going to tell South Africans to simply move on?
It's not about apologizing. It's about accounting for the past 30 years. How has been this journey led by the ANC? What obstacles we have had to confront, and to what extent in dealing with those obstacles we committed certain mistakes which are inherent in any process of change.
Do you want to apologize for those mistakes, though?
No, not necessarily to apologize, just to acknowledge them, because you see, the process of social transformation is a complex undertaking which is understood not only by the ANC, but the people of our country as a whole. And of course, it's inevitable that along that journey, which, as I say, is impacted upon by both domestic and external factors, certain mistakes or setbacks are going to be suffered by the people of the country. And that is what we have acknowledged. I mean, and we have acted on those weaknesses. If you look at the commissions of inquiries that we have had, those commissions of inquiries were not sanctioned by anybody else, but the democratic state led by the African National Congress, out of our own shared recognition that this journey has somehow been weakened along the way by actions that were not consistent with the aspirations of our people. Do
you think you've done enough, though, to prevent another decline that you've seen since 2009 in terms of electoral support?
I think we're doing very well. The first thing that, of course, we're now taking to these elections as an advantage that nobody has is our experience of governance, is our knowledge, is the caliber and the quality of the cadreship. If you look at, for instance, if you were to just say, let's look at the top 50 of the candidates that have been put forward by different political parties who are contesting elections, I'm quite certain that you will find more credible names that you can depend and trust on in the list of the ANC as opposed to other political parties. So that on its own gives us a hope. And we know that the great masses of our people are equally confident that the ANC will be able to weather the storms and put South Africa on an upward trajectory.
But some of your candidates have a cloud above their heads.
Sure, we know that, and we've acknowledged that.
So how are they the best then?
The National Executive Committee discussed that question, and it acknowledged that there were certain processes which were not concluded internally in the party. And I do want to say, by the way, that that is a drop in an ocean. It's an exception to the whole list of the movement. It affects very few people. But
state capture affected a whole lot of people in South Africa. So it's not a drop in the ocean.
No, I agree. But I'm saying in terms of the composition, the totality of our candidate list, the names that have been fingered out as bringing some negativity on the overall list of the African National Congress, that if you consider that, not just the state capture as a phenomenon we have had to contend with, but the names, you will see that you really can't say, because of those few names, whose issues are still being processed by the National Executive Committee, therefore the ANC cannot be trusted to have put before South Africans a team that is going to take our country to the next level.
So is it true, especially now that you're talking to us about the processing of this, some of the reports are suggesting that there was a fight back by some of those you were appealing to as the NEC to be able to withdraw from the list, who are facing a cloud, but they simply said no?
No, it's not true. By the way, when we discuss any matter in the ANC which involves one of us, the rule is that we've got to be outside that meeting. So when people say there was a fight back, I don't know what they mean by that, because none of those comrades were inside the meeting when the matters were fully canvassed by the National Executive Committee, because the reason why we've adopted that approach is to allow for a situation where each one of us will freely express their own views about the nature of the problem and how it can be overcome.
What was your view? I'm very
without
interested.
being constrained by the presence of those whose names are under discussion.
What was your view on that?
My view is exactly what the SG communicated.
But what was your
as
personal
a position
view
of the NEC?
What was your personal view? I know that you say there were discussions that were had, and of course, in a process of discussion, you will emerge with one voice. But what was your view?
I grew up, I'm growing up in the African National Congress, and when you go to a meeting, you go to a meeting with a particular view, but that view is no longer important when the NEC has taken a decision. What becomes the collective outcome of the National Executive Committee becomes the synthesis and the collective reflection of the collective that sits in the NEC. So it doesn't matter, even if I were to tell you that this decision is aligned to my view or not aligned to my, it's neither here nor there, because we all had an opportunity to discuss the matters, at the end of which we produce an outcome that was our considered view as the wisest move in taking the process forward. So
how then do you explain to a voter who says, I simply do not understand the fact that you are telling us as voters that this is the best foot that you could put forward, and the voter then says to you, I'm not convinced that some of the names should be on this list because it looks like you're not respecting the processes of the Integrity Commission that you yourself as a party are saying that you're trying to strengthen. So what do you say to that particular voter who doesn't trust?
I would say to the voter, we're the only organization in this country that is concerned about matters of integrity, that has taken a decision both at a level of conferences and the National Executive Committee, that we want the nation to judge us, not on the basis of what the Constitution of the Republic says, but on the basis that we are revolutionaries who have a duty to behave and to conduct ourselves beyond reproach. And therefore, in order to achieve that objective, we set up the Integrity Commission, in which without you being invited, once there are certain things about your name, you must appear before the IC. It must listen to you, produce a report, allow you to comment if you are not happy with the report, and later on the report be presented to the National Executive Committee, which has the authority to either adopt the recommendations of the Integrity Commission or to do so with amendments. Now, in this case, the issue was that some of these reports have not yet served before the NEC, so that the NEC as a collective will apply its mind and make a conclusion that is consistent with the position that it has adopted over the years. So that is the reason why essentially these matters could not be concluded. It's not because of any other reasons. So my assurance to the voter is that this is the ANC that has been a pathfinder in terms of determining the standing of how those who are leaders and members, especially the leaders in the ANC and government, must be measured. Because we argue that because of the task that is on our shoulder to be the midwives of social transformation in this country, we can't really say that we must be measured in the same way that ordinary people are measured.
But
and that is why we look beyond what...
You've been slow to act in some of the matters relating to corruption. So how do you say that you are in a better position? Well,
in many respects, we've acted very swiftly. I mean, our list, for instance, doesn't have anyone who's currently attending a court case, doesn't have anyone who has been sanctioned and a decision made by the disciplinary committee of the ANC at whatever levels. It's only the few matters, as I said to you, which are themselves still subjected to a process as the SGN president has been articulating it in public.
All right, let's see then what happens. But thank you so much for your time this evening. Do appreciate it. That was the ANC's Head of Elections, Mdumiseni Ntuli.